My name is Mary Trong, and today is March 18th, 2015. VATV is the voice of Vietnamese American from the Greater Boston area, and it's sponsored by VATV, which is Vietnamese American Initiative for Development. And you can follow the program live on every Wednesday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Via the Comcast Channel 9 and RCN Channel 15, and also online at www.bnntv.org. And this program will be repeated on Sunday at 5, Monday at 1, and Tuesday at 11 a.m. So for today's program, we have the pleasure and honor to invite Miss Barbara Colarossi.
Right.
Patty
Colarossi.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I wrote it wrong.
That's okay.
Yes, I apologize. Miss Patty Colarossi from the U.S. Department of Labor. So as you can see, this is a very important topic that Ms. Colarossi is able to come and join us. So please call if you have any question at 617-708-3290. So welcome again, Patty, if I may call you your first name.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. That's my mother-in-law's name. So
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So it's a good name. Okay. So
well, thank you for having me. We're thrilled that we were invited to come on and speak, and we're really just excited to talk and have the Vietnamese community learn a little bit more about the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division.
Yes. And if I may ask you, share with us about what you do and how long have you been with the U.S. Department of Labor?
So I've been with the U.S. Department of Labor for 25 years.
Yeah.
My office is the U.S. is the Wage and Hour Division of the U.S. Department of Labor. So we enforce what we call one of the major statutes we enforce is the Fair Labor Standards Act. So we enforce the minimum wage, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act is the minimum wage, overtime, record keeping, and child labor provisions of the federal law.
I see.
For the first 21 years of my career, I was an investigator. So I would be somebody that would go out and investigate companies that may not be in compliance with certain provisions of our laws. And in the last 4 years, I've taken on the role as the Community Outreach and Resource Planning Specialist, which mainly I'm here to provide outreach and education to both employer groups, employee groups, and really, we want to be out there in the community trying to educate people on the Wage and Hour Division.
So let's talk about the minimum wage. What is it now? And I heard that there'll be a new change.
Well, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25.
Okay.
The state of Massachusetts is $9 an hour. It's always, whenever we're enforcing a statute between federal and state law, we're always going to enforce the stricter of the two. So in Massachusetts, for employers that are subject to the minimum wage, it would be $9 an hour because that's the Massachusetts minimum wage.
Right, I see. So you're not mandated by federal law at all that you have to start from $7.25 or whatever.
Well, under federal law, we would enforce the $7.25 an
as
hour.
a minimum.
Yes.
Okay, but then depending on which state, you can set it higher.
Correct.
But can never be lower.
It can never be lower than $7.25.
Yes, I see. So if you can explain for us, since this is a very important topic, and if you can explain some of the laws, that the U.S. Department of Labor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we enforce the Fair Labor Standards Act, which I just mentioned, which is the minimum wage, and that is a good part of our work.
Okay.
We also enforce the Family Medical Leave Act, which is for employers that have 50 or more employees, that employees can take, that qualify, can take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to care for a newborn child, a parent, a spouse, or themselves, and not be in jeopardy of losing their job. We also enforce various other regulations, including the Davis-Bacon Act, which is, and the Service Contract Act, which are provisions that if they're doing working on a federal project, that they have to get a prevailing wage. We also enforce certain H provisions. We enforce under the H-1B and the H-2A provisions, which H-1B is for workers that may come here that are highly skilled, and they have to get a prevailing wage rate. And the H-2A provisions would be agricultural workers that may come here because we may not be able to have those workers here, so they come in, and I don't know if you ever go apple picking. They're usually working in the apple orchards in the fall. But those are the various statutes that we enforce.
I see. So how big is the agency?
We're in Boston. We have about 10 investigators, and we have about I think about 1,000 people in the agency throughout the country. So whatever we enforce here, they enforce it in California, and it's across the country. So whenever a lot of times we'll do a company that's based out of Boston, but they may have a location in another city somewhere else in the country, and we're able to, because of the fact that we're all one, we're able to take that forward.
So how does one file a complaint with you?
So every day in the Boston District Office, we have what we call an investigator of the day that's on duty, and they answer technical calls to the public that comes in. Sometimes people will call in and file a complaint. Based on information that they think may not be correct, that they may be in violation, or they may just call with a question. If they do want to file a complaint, we will take it right then on the phone. There's also various community-based groups that we may work with that an employee may not feel comfortable coming to us. They may be afraid to come into our building. It's a federal building, and sometimes they hear the DOL, the Department of Labor, they think it's the government.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
So sometimes we will work with some of the community-based groups, and they may go there and give them information, and then they may call us.
What happens if they violate the law?
So if an employer, does violate the law, and surprisingly enough, when I was an investigator, a lot of employers violate the law, and they don't really mean to. Most of them the majority of them over the years that I did investigations are nice people, and they just made a mistake.
Could you give an example?
But there are people that aren't so nice.
Yeah.
Intentionally do not want to that they want to work around the law to not pay and provisions with the law. So what we do is, if we do get information, whether it's a complaint, sometimes we have directed initiatives that we want to do as part of our strategic plan that may focus on a low-wage industry. So what we do is we go out and do an investigation, and luckily we're very fortunate that we have Portuguese and Spanish-speaking staff, and we also recently hired a Mandarin and Cantonese-speaking staff. And we also have a translation line that translates multiple languages. So we try to coordinate interviewing the employees, whether it be in the company. If we don't feel that they might be intimidated, we try to reach out to them in those other ways. And then from there, if an employer is found in violation, we ask them to pay the back wages. And sometimes there's liquidated damages along with that. And sometimes they agree to pay, and if they don't, then we would take it to the next level, which we may file a civil suit in federal court.
I see. Could you give an example of how people violate the law?
Sure. There's simple mistakes. Sometimes people just miss someone's hours, and then someone might come forward and it's an easy correction. Other times people may pay, say, straight time for overtime. They may say, well, you can work as many hours as you want, but we can't pay you overtime.
Like time and a half, right?
Exactly. It's time and a half after 40 hours in a week for an employer that's covered under the federal law.
Right.
And then there's instances where an employer may not pay for hours worked. They may tell them, your hours are 8 to 5, and you take an hour for lunch. But then the employee doesn't really get a lunch, and they work through their lunch. And the employer says, well, you're supposed to take a lunch, So that might result in an overtime violation there. Sometimes an employer will take deductions. They may say, if you, break something, we're going to take it out of your pay, and it may result in them being brought below the minimum wage. Sometimes, employers may pay with 2 separate paychecks, or they may pay in cash, or they may go as far as even paying with 2 different names.
I see.
So that there's all different ways. And like I said, I did a lot of investigations over the years, and most employers are just trying to do the right thing. But then there are some that get really creative to try to avoid paying overtime or complying with the federal law.
So let me ask you, is the company does the company have the right to decide whether they can grant an hour lunch for the employee or not?
Well,
or is it?
Under federal law, we don't enforce any type of meal break.
I see.
That's usually enforced under the Massachusetts state law. But what we do say is, if somebody takes, less than a half hour, or they take 30 minutes or more, we would not consider that to be hours worked, provided that it's uninterrupted and the employee's allowed to move about freely and not required to do any work. If they work less than that, say if they have a 15-minute meal break or say a break in the morning, in the afternoon, that would be paid time.
Oh, okay, because they're entitled to that.
Yes.
So then you're entitled the 15-minute morning and afternoon
You're
break.
not the break. We don't enforce the breaks, but what we say is if they do have the breaks, they have to be paid. So. Really, I mean, as far as an enforcement of meal breaks or any kind of breaks, the federal law doesn't have that enforcement. That's the state. We just say they have to be paid if it's, unless it's 30 minutes or more uninterrupted.
I see. But they're mandated to give people a meal break at lunchtime, whether half hour or 45 minutes or an hour. It's up to
it would be under the Massachusetts state law that they would enforce that.
I see. I'm learning a lot. So now I know. So what are some of the issues that you're seeing in the workplace?
Well, in Massachusetts, we've had a lot of employers that may hire what we call contract labor providers, and this happened is happening quite a bit in the restaurant industry. For example, restaurant had cooks and everything, and then another company comes in and says, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you let me hire those employees, and those will be my employees," almost like as an outsourcing. And then you don't have to worry about anything. And then what happens is a lot of times, the employees continue working under the same manager, really, for the restaurant, and sometimes that contract labor provider isn't, reporting the overtime or isn't paying them the overtime, and then it results in, violations.
Like you said, it's a lack of information. And so a lot of employers, decided something where they have no clue that it's violating the law or it's not compliance, right?
Some do. And like I said, over the years, you certainly, I did a lot of great employers out there that just really made mistakes. But then there are some that intentionally, they intentionally try to avoid paying overtime so that they're more profitable.
Is there any community where they need more information, about compliance than the others? I'm talking about especially in the immigrant community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In immigrant communities, a lot of times, we do have some relationships with various community-based immigrant groups, and they definitely need things in their native language. They need a place of trust that they can go to, and they need to feel comfortable. And a lot of times they're not paid correctly, and they're very fearful of retaliation. And the employer tries to put all kinds of things in their head, that they're going to report them if they're undocumented, or they're going, that if they go to the Department of Labor, they're going to do something, and so they're reluctant. But we're making progress. We're making a lot of progress. We, having the translation service and having staff that is bilingual has been a huge help, and working with various community-based groups has really helped us reach out to that community and help them. And a lot of times we are able to get them back wages, and sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't work out. But
what is the average length of time that it requires for you to get involved once you know that the company might be in violation of the wage law?
Well, it really depends. Sometimes it takes a day. Sometimes it takes months. Because we have to develop a case. Sometimes we find just egregious violations that take a lot of time. That we have to do a lot of interviews, and we have to. Sometimes the records are falsified, and we have to go back, and we have to, go through, and it can take a while. But we want to get it right. So we don't want to, if we're going to when we go into a company, we're not just, if we have somebody that complained, and by the way, if anybody calls our office with a complaint, we don't disclose. We never disclose during an investigation if somebody's complained or who it is. We never. That's just not part of our procedure. But once we have that information, when we go out to the company, we look at everything. We don't look just for that employee. And a lot of times, looking back to when my investigator days, I'd go in and there'd be one complaint, and then I'd go in and I'd find a whole nother section of problems. So it really is hard to put a timeline on it.
I see.
Some are faster than others.
Yeah, of course. People are nervous about filing the complaint. So how have you been able to reach out to people? What kind of channel do you use in order to get the message out?
Well, a lot of times, sometimes when we go out, when an investigator goes out and we know that they may be nervous, we sometimes will give our number and our card, to them to call later.
Right.
Or sometimes we will collaborate with, like I said, a community-based group or maybe an advocacy group and say, maybe you can call them and see if you can go there, and then the investigator can meet you there where you're more, you feel more comfortable. Because like I said, we are in a federal building, and people do, when they think of the government, if you're not from this country, you think of the government. You don't think of the Department of Labor or the IRS, you think of just the government. So we try to take those channels so that they feel comfortable and to try to get the information.
So on average, how many clients have you served annually? Just on average.
Geez,
I don't know.
Over the across the country, I mean, millions of dollars for back wages to employees and thousands of employees. In Boston, we've been very successful with retrieving those back wages. We had a very large case last year that resulted in over $1 million in back wages for one employer.
Well, I heard from time to time, that it's happened in the Asian community, how, like you mentioned about the restaurant workers and how the employer haven't paid them. There are a lot of, money could go back 6 months, a year, and they're afraid, to speak up because number one, they don't know where to go.
Right.
There's the language barrier.
Right.
And at the same time, the fear of of reporting.
Absolutely.
And especially not knowing where to go to report. So,
Right.
I can see, I hear these cases, and I really, feel bad. So, I'm glad that at least you're here appearing on VATV program to get the words out.
And they can always
everyone.
call us and talk to us first, and then if they can think about it, and then if they want to coordinate with somebody in a local group, a local community that they may be a part of, even if it's a local church, we can come out to them, and if they, we want to be able to service them. If they're not being paid correctly, then the employer is at a profitable advantage to its competitors. And really, the Fair Labor Standards Act, when it was established back in 1938, was to prevent employers from having employees work overtime because they wanted to create more jobs. It was a time in our country where there weren't a lot of opportunities, there weren't a lot of jobs. So for that employer out there that is paying overtime, it's not fair, to the competitor that's not.
Yeah. So since we only have a couple more minutes, what would your advice be to everyone watching the show tonight?
You can always call. You can always call us. It doesn't hurt to call us. The Boston District Office number is 617-624-6700. We're not going to, take your name right away. We're not going to, you can, if you need language assistance, we have like I said, we have a language line with multiple languages, and I know we have Vietnamese, and you can talk to us, and then you can go from there. We're not. If you do decide to file a complaint, we're not going to disclose your name, and we're not going to do anything with, hopefully, we don't want you to feel threatened, with us going in, but, the laws are in place for a reason. People are entitled to make a fair wage for their work.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So once again, if you can repeat your phone number.
Sure. It's 617-624-6700. And our website, if you wanted to look on our website, that also has information in Vietnamese that I'm going to actually send to VATV so that they can post it on there, is www.wagehour, wagehour.dol.gov.
Great, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So for tonight's program, we appreciate that you're watching tonight, and if you have any question or any comments that you would like to send to VATV, please do so at vatv@vatv.org, or you can call us 617-822-3717. And I hope to have Ms. Colarossi coming back in the future so she can talk more about other details. Thank you so much for watching the show this evening, and have a warm night. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next week's show. Thank you.